usually in life, what we get, not always, but for most of us, what we have coming in is fairly fixed. But where we tend to fall down is what's going out. So the most useful thing we can all do for our own sort of personal finances is be a bit more disciplined, have more of a budgeting, and then secondly, make sure we're paying back very expensive debt. We talked about that last time I came on. You know, credit cards, are a terrible way to borrow. Even now, certain banks, which I certainly don't want to mention, have a very high, the APR is the true cost of borrowing. It can be 15-20%, yet interest rates are 0.5.
Yes.
So don't borrow money on credit cards. Debit cards are okay. You're taking money. Back. And also credit cards from a Christian perspective. I'm not saying they're wrong. It's not in the Bible. But credit cards are like the, those violet lights you get in like kebab shops where they kind of attract in the fly and zap. So every time we get our credit cards out of our wallet, we should hear a little zap. That's us being zapped in terms of spending money that we may not have.
They seem to be all right, providing. I mean, I don't travel quite so much as I used to, but when I was traveling around quite a lot, I found the credit card so useful that you didn't have to carry cash with you. But provided you paid it off when you got your bill at the end of the month, your interest was zero or very little.
Doug, that's true if we have the financial discipline to pay it back.
That's the point that I need you to make. Yes,
that was a little bit the point on budgeting.
Yes.
The temptation is one doesn't pay it back, and the credit card, then you get interest.
Use that money elsewhere.
And you get interest on interest. Einstein said compound interest is the most powerful thing in the universe.
Did he really?
Yeah.
I definitely.
Honestly, yeah. So compound interest works in your favour if you have savings, because if you have £1 and you save it, then you get, let's say, 5% if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But then you're getting interest on the interest on the interest, and if you're a mathematician, over time that amounts to a huge amount, so that works in your favour if you're a saver, but it works against you because you're then paying interest on your interest.
Yes.
If you're a lender. By the way, on a Christian context as well, I'm a great believer, especially if you're a naturally, as my wife would tell you, disorganised person like me, in just setting up a standing order, for example, to your local church or to a favourite Christian organisation. We all, my father used to say, people have good intentions, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. So good intentions are not enough, and we need to be a bit more disciplined. I'm sure many of your viewers are very well disciplined, but if you're like me, it can be a bit chaotic.
And that is it, isn't it? It's I think some people just don't, finances, they're not very scriptural, they're not very biblical, but as you said, actually money is mentioned a lot of time in the Bible, is the way you handle the money is mentioned. But it is being disciplined in those areas, and if we cannot be disciplined, it is asking for help to be disciplined in those areas, isn't it? Because I think one of the areas where many people have got into trouble with is because of the credit card bills, and they just, because they don't check them each month, and they have no idea what's going on. I notice most I don't know if it's a law now, but most will have to say if you don't pay anything back or you pay the minimum back, your credit will your interest next month will be. But I don't think some people read that.
No.
But if you do read that, it's shocking the amount of interest you're going to pay.
Well, there was a famous case a few years ago where Matt Barrow, who was then the chairman of Barclays, one of the UK biggest banks, appeared before the House of Commons and said under no circumstance would he allow his children to borrow on Barclays cards. Yeah. So if the chairman of Barclays says it's good, it's very good advice.
Yeah. I had this email from when you were last here, and we got some others coming in now, but I've been saving it for you because it was from Mike, and I won't read it all, but I just want to bring out the flavour of it. Mike said he was saved in '82, and he was reading a lot about IMF and World Bank, etc. And the light was switched on for me when I read a book by Hal Lindsey, A New World is Coming. And then he goes on to say, through that book, that many other things dealt with, but nothing is highlighted in the secular media with regard to the EU and the schemers that are formulating a new world order and global government. This plotting being done in relative secrecy tends to attract a lesser criticism than I believe should be the case. This suits the devil and his earthly agents because he now advances almost unimpeded. The pound has been manipulated by Brown to the point where it's almost less than euro value, therefore making it acceptable to the people of Britain. I think he means the euro acceptable to people of Britain. He sold the country's asset-based gold holdings for a song and saved the banks with a gift of £560 plus billion to undermine the UK's bread and butter finance industry. And I think that gives you the heart of what Mike is saying. Is this conspiracy theory, or is there some truth in what Mike is saying?
Both.
Oh, thank you.
I would say thank you for your email, Mike. My personal view, and if you disagree, please come on and argue, would be that the first half is slightly in the direction of conspiracy thinking, but the second half is pretty accurate, where Mike points out that, for example, the government did sell Britain's very large gold reserves at more or less the exact bottom of the market. I think it was around $300 an ounce. Yesterday, the gold price went over 1,000, so it's gone up 3 times. So that wasn't a good idea. And it's also true that the bankers, the government, have messed up big time, which we were talking about. The UK finances, which used to be, by the way, in excellent shape. I mean, pensions is another thing we haven't talked about, which was 20 years ago. The UK pensions industry was the envy of the world, and now it's a disaster. So. I'm not a politician or interested really in politics. I think salvation doesn't come from politicians left, right, or centre. But what Mike says there about basic financial irresponsibility is true. Where I would part company with Mike would be, what he's talking about is sort of global free trade. I mean, it's an interesting book called, it's not a Christian book, but it's been a bestseller, called The World is Flat by Thomas Friedman, who's a well-known writer, American. And the flat world is a world where basically people in India, people in China are competing more and more with people in the UK, and it's very, very easy for big multinational companies to take products from one to another. Outsourcing, moving jobs to India would be a manifestation of that. But I don't think that's a conspiracy. I think that's just, capitalism in action. We also shouldn't forget that the best way for taking people out of poverty in countries like India and China is to allow them to buy and sell. So, I mean, capitalism, like money, certainly it's not something we want to put our faith in, but it's the sort of least worst of the, if you think of the alternatives, communism or something,
yes,
it's the least worst system. So the capitalist system is not going to bring us anything apart from more ups and downs, bubbles and crashes. But I don't think, in a way, maybe somebody else has a different view, that there's a kind of global conspiracy to attack the church through that. I'm sure the devil, I think the danger, Doug, for us as Christians is not a global conspiracy by bankers or EU bureaucrats. Yes. It's the conspiracy by the devil to tempt us to put our faith in money and to live for today and not live for eternity. Imagine we have a dot and a line, okay? Yes. A little dot, and then there's a line that goes out of your studio over London for hundreds of miles. Well, the dot is our life now, our brief life. How many more years will we be alive? 10, 20, 30 years. And then eternity. So we should be living for the line, and if we had more faith, we would live for the line. But instead of which, we live on this little dot now, and our priorities as a result are often wrong.
Very interesting in your response on the whole conspiracy stuff, because I often get information through about there is a conspiracy here for all the top bankers and all the people with all the top money coming together, and they all meet together secretly from time to time. And
if that was true, Doug, they're doing a pretty bad job. Yes. If you look at the world economy,
but they're creating this this problem. But what you are saying is, from your understanding on this, both as a Christian and as somebody that's been in the financial world for many, many years, is yes, there can be mismanagement of money, and the government, you would feel, has mismanaged sometimes, because the whole banking situation, there have been many situations where that, individual banks or people have mismanaged, etc. But there isn't a global conspiracy that is happening behind the scenes, that's working, pulling all these strings.
Tonight on BBC, and I haven't seen it, so I'm not recommending it from a Christian perspective or not, there's a drama of the fall of the House of Lehman.
Oh, right.
A sort of real-life dramatisation. And